Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to YouTube Live. Tonight we're going to talk about the book of Romans. And the reason why I say we're going to talk about the book of Romans is because it brings up something quite interesting. Something that I didn't think about for a long time, but this is definitely something worth covering. Now, I know that in the past, when the Bible was written, there were different authors, there were different people that wrote the Bible. And one of them happened to be Paul. Now, Paul wrote the book of Romans, and it was to be a book where that the church was dealing with tensions between Jewish and Gentile believers. And there's a whole lot of things that I'm going to say go on during this time. Now, the Gentile believers and the Jewish people, it seems like they could not get along. Therefore, it seemed like Paul would sit down and write a letter to the Jews because he would write a book or he would write a letter to the Gentiles. I mean, you know, back then, people didn't get along very well the way that you'd expect them to. But unifying the Roman Church. Now, there's churches all across the United States, and there's churches all over the country. But the book of Romans had something more. They wanted to be able to express how they felt, I guess, in another way. But the book of Romans, there's all kind of information about it on Google, online, and you just have to go through and look and pick out what you believe is and is going to get some views or get some people to watch. Now, too, the church back then was just getting started, and unifying the Roman church that was dealing with tensions between the Jewish and the Gentile believers because the Roman government had previously expelled Jews from Rome. Gentiles had taken over leadership of the house churches. When Jewish Christians returned, conflict arose over the cultural practices and authorities. So, it's like, how do you explain all of this? And it's very, very difficult in some cases. But Paul wrote the book of Romans to introduce himself to the Roman church, secure their financial and logical support for the mission of Spain, unify fractured Jews and Gentile generations or congregations, and provided a seminamic fundamental summary of the gospel message. So, when you think about it, Paul wrote the book of Romans, and he wrote it to introduce himself to the church. And, a lot of people back then probably did not understand what was going on back in the days. But why Paul wrote Romans, putting the pieces together. Paul had three purposes in view in writing the letter, namely a missionary purpose, a pastoral purpose, and an apostolic purpose. Now, there were a lot of apostolic churches, I would think, back then. And people would take their chances, or take the time, I should say, and go to church to hear the Word of God. And one of the books that they heard was from the book of Romans. And the 4 reasons to read Romans. Now, there are 4 reasons to read Romans, but we don't know what those 4 reasons are. And I'm sure that there are answers or clues to that online. If people go to look it up, they will see that there are a number of reasons out there to want to read the book of Romans. Another thing too is, why is the year 2033 so important? I've often wondered that myself. And we're going to explore that in another live stream somewhere down the road, because I'm just as curious about that as you are. So, stay tuned for that somewhere down the line. But Paul's letter to the Romans, in a nutshell. Paul writes his letter to the Romans church, a grammar of their support for his ministry endeavors to the far west, explaining that salvation comes only when you want to get saved or whatever. But we're going to also look at when the salvation comes as well in the live stream. So I hope that I have touched on some things here tonight about who wrote the book of Romans, and it was Paul. And I hope that you all have got some sort of understanding because I've tried to explain this the best I could. I know that there are some um, topics that I do not explain very well, but I thought I would give myself a chance at this one. But Paul actually sat down and wrote the book of Romans. So, I'm sure everybody wanted to know. And if you look in your holy Bibles, it should say that Paul wrote that book of Romans. So until the next time, thank you for watching. If you have any comments, questions, and or remarks, please feel free to put those in the comments section. Also, please hit the thumbs up if you like this live stream. And also, ask your friends to watch the video as well. I'm sure that you will find something interesting in this live stream. Till the next time on YouTube Live, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your evening and a blessed weekend. And we'll see you later with more YouTube Live.